Hello, everyone from Bonn, Germany. Thank you for joining the Daring Cities 2023 virtual forum session, How to Host a Mini COP in Your Town Hall, Localizing the Global Stocktake. My name is Alyssa Chanot. I am the manager of the Climate Action Team at the World Secretariat here at ICLEI in Bonn, Germany. For your information, we will be recording today's session. The recording and slides, as well as additional support materials, will be made available to you following the webinar. We're excited today because we have a fantastic lineup of speakers to provide you with both a macro and micro overview on the global stocktake and the importance of local and regional input into the process, as well as practical guidance on how to go about hosting an event in your own town hall to ensure your residents' voices are lifted up at COP28. And finally, we're pleased to share with you a funding opportunity to assist you in hosting your own local stocktake. We encourage you today, if you have any questions during the webinar, to please use the question and answer box, and we have reserved some time at the end of today's webinar to answer those here live today. Today, we have some great speakers. We'll be first having a welcome video from Mayor Frank County, President of our Global Executive Committee. We'll also be hearing from Andy Deacon, Co-Managing Director from the Global Covenant of Mayors, on the importance of local and subnational contribution to the global stocktake. Then we'll be turning things over to Eunice Ericon, our Director of Global Advocacy here at ICLEI, to talk about this unique opportunity of localizing the global stocktake. Then we will hear from Juliet Oloch from UNGO, who will talk about the importance of youth engagement and our collaboration with UNGO to ensure youth voices are heard as part of this process. Then we will hear from Cal Roberts from ICLEI as well, who will give us very practical step-by-step guidance on how to host your own local stocktake. And then we will hear from the City of Concord from the United States, Council Representative Rob Werner, who will share what their experience was like hosting a local stocktake. And then we'll turn it over to question and answer. So first, we will turn things over and have an invitation from Mayor Frank County on the stocktake for global climate emergency.
Over the past year, ICLEI and I have been placing an emphasis on moving from ideas to action. Many of you have felt the same urgency, and now there's a critical action item we need you to consider. For the first time, local governments can participate in the global stocktake process, which is a critical step in launching a local climate mitigation and adaptation plan. A stocktake allows you to hear from your residents, youth, business, community organizations, and other stakeholders about how climate change impacts them, forming your initial plan to meet Paris Climate Agreements. Ahead of COP28, we encourage you to have your own mini COP within your municipality. This event can be a whole day or even just a few hours of hearing from stakeholders on where they are with meeting Paris Climate Agreement goals, what direction you want to take next, and how you can make plans in a way that is environmentally just. The outcome from your local stocktake event will provide official contribution to the global stocktake. ICLEI is honored to provide you with the resources you need to host your local stocktake event. Collectively, our direct submissions to the UNFCCC will show the reality of climate emergency within our localities. We know that local governments are where the action happens, and we're the first ones to respond in a crisis. Now is the time to show the global climate community our impact and how we serve on the front lines. I hope you'll join us in the local stocktake process.
We'd like to thank Mayor Frank County for that wonderful invitation and his office for helping coordinate that video. Next, we'd like to invite Andy Deacon from Global Covenant of Mayors to talk about the importance of local and subnational input into the global stocktake.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, colleagues, for joining this important session today. Both very timely in the wake of the release of announcements on the global stocktake last week and the beginning of some responses from all kinds of NGOs, networks, and high-level champions. And I'm sure we'll hear more from the UN themselves in New York next week. But as you will have seen in the global and potentially some local media, then the general view seems to be that we are well off track of being in line to be anywhere near Paris Agreement requirements across three important areas of activity: on mitigation or emissions reduction, on resilience building and adaptation, but also as part of the stocktake exercise, the UNFCCC also looked at what they call means of implementation. So the funding and finance being put into place to be able to deliver on those national government plans submitted through NDCs. And none of those elements are adding up to be able to deliver against the Paris Agreement. And the global stocktake is very clear about that. But what's also clear, and we know, having worked with colleagues from ICLE across the LGMA constituency and elsewhere in the production of a couple of multi-level climate action playbooks, one published at COP last year and the year before in Glasgow, is that local action is delivering, as you heard from Mayor County just a few minutes ago. And we're starting to assemble a library of good examples of good practice of where multi-level action can deliver. And that's available on the resource center of the globalcovenantofmayors.org website. But there's much more that we can do, and very much here today to encourage additional cities, and we'll be conducting additional outreach through the Global Covenant of Mayors network to encourage more local stock takes. As Alyssa mentioned in opening, and you heard from Mayor County, this really is a kind of changing narrative and a moment for change, and an opportunity for local and subnational leaders to bring their voices and opinions into that global stocktake exercise. And as you heard from Mayor County, to do that with full involvement of communities and residents. It really is an important moment. Some of you will have heard a lot, for example, about the partnership between Michael Bloomberg and the COP presidency, and we're looking for opportunities to highlight local action in ways that haven't been done before, together with colleagues from ICLE and various other networks through the LGMA, and to make additional opportunities available at COP28 in Dubai. As ever, GCOM will be doing its add-up of potential emission savings and resilience action through an annual aggregation report and exercise, and many of you may be contributing there, but would encourage those of you who are thinking whether this local stocktake is worth the effort, whether it's the right thing to do, and really to grasp the nettle and make the most of this opportunity. There's a 2-year window for the next update of these nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement, and getting in early, building in that local insight and understanding, and bringing groups of cities together at national level will really demonstrate how local and subnational leadership is making a valuable contribution towards the Paris Agreement. And the stocktake can seem like an abstract exercise, but we've seen extreme weather events impacting cities and other subnational actors right throughout 2023 and in the years before. And without kind of bringing this additional local dimension in, the Paris Agreement will miss all of that, but then we will be well off track to meet targets. And as you heard Mayor County say, and I know ICLE colleagues, very keen on emphasizing local leaders are often called on as first responders after some of these disasters. And by undertaking local stocktakes, we'll all put ourselves in a better position, not only to be able to respond, but to demonstrate how that local action is really making a difference. So thanks, Alyssa, and thanks, Eunice. Stay tuned for more through the Global Covenant of Mayors network, those of you who are GCOM signatories. But if you are wavering in making that decision, then let Eunice and I know, and we'll come and talk to you to try and persuade you to get on board and undertake a local stock take. It was great for me personally to work with LGMA colleagues and to be involved in the direct bond decision making at UNFCCC earlier in the year, and just to say it really does make a difference. And it was great that the UNFCCC are opening up to kind of more inclusion of local and subnational voices through the stocktake process. But we absolutely have to demonstrate that we are taking part and doing that, and you all playing your role in doing that will be tremendously important. So thanks very much, and back to you, Alyssa.
Thanks, Andy. This is very much a collaborative group effort, and we're happy to have partners like GCOM involved in this effort. Next, I will turn it over to and invite Eunice to speak about really what this opportunity is and give us the high-level overview of what we're looking at over these next few months as we build up to COP28.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thanks for the gathering an impressive lineup of our colleagues, and I'm very excited that we are really rolling out this movement of taking stock at the local level as a contribution to the global one. Next slide. So there has been a number of references. There might be external colleagues who may be a bit bored of abbreviations, but I think I will add a couple of more to that. Some things that you heard very frequently, LGMA. The next slide is in fact our UNFCCC language. Is in simply this is the largest family of towns, cities, regions, in short, subnationals in the UNFCCC process. This is the official, let's say, umbrella that we are influencing the process. And over these years, we made ourselves recognized in the Paris Agreement. We also managed to get the term multi-level action in the Glasgow Climate Pact, which is giving us the basis for way forward. Kata, if you can turn the next slide. I will not go into details, but those who are familiar or those who are interested, you can go back to this 20 years of plus years of our engagement in this process. So let's go to more into the next. What is the global stocktake from the national point of view? Let's remember Paris Agreement has handed over the full responsibility to the national processes. UN will only just welcome those reports. Therefore, scrutiny can only be done by transparency and accountability. And one of the ways is that at every circles of 5 years, before the end of the cycle, there is a recommendation that they take lessons learned so that this could inspire that the next level of climate plans could be even more ambitious and more action-oriented. So this will be the first version of this first global stocktake, meaning the Paris Agreement climate plans will be now reviewed. The one that was drafted in 2015 and updated in the way at Glasgow, this will be our focus. Next slide. And obviously, before going on to the local level, we also wanted to have a bird's eye view of how this Paris Agreement changed the landscape. In fact, before and after, there are some quantified figures. I mean, the number of local and regional governments committed to climate neutrality, those who have declared climate emergency, are enormous increasing. Of course, this is a motivation, but how much of these are reflected into the national plans? That's a big question. We have seen over the past couple of years on the way to Glasgow, finally, we have seen several nations to do this, from Japan, US to Dominican Republic, Rwanda, and we want this to be much more a kind of a mainstream in this new generation of climate plans. And we are also seeing urbanization becoming much more visible in the NDCs, but the pace is not enough. Next slide. While these are the figures, these figures do not come from just fall from sky. There has been numerous mechanisms inside UNFCCC, outside UNFCCC, that every process is now addressing local and regional governments or subnationals in its entirety, so that they can work with them both to be more ambitious with their power to onboard, but also help them to deliver their goals, so that it is a collective effort. It's not anymore us versus them. It's not mayors against ministers. It is collectively legislators, executive bodies, stakeholders together. And that's why it is encouraging us to say that the next phase should be much better than the past. Next slide. So in that space, you have heard there has been at least 1.5 years of discussions in the UNFCCC, and this is just the synthesis report just released yesterday. During this 1.5 years, LGMA representatives from Global Covenant to CC35, from Committee of the Regions to Under 2 Coalition, ICLE, obviously, mayors from Kelimane to Casablanca, they were actively involved in all these discussions. The synthesis report is, in fact, feeding to the discussions in the Dubai, and that is why the discussion now is important to shape the outcome there. If you look at the synthesis report, there are good things. First of all, numerous reference to local emerging governments. That's good that they are not anymore ignoring us. There's also numerous references to urbanization as well. The bad news is that there's no reference to multi-level. So it's still, this concept is not being embedded into this discussion. And of course, this report takes into account the documents that were submitted. So it is a signal to us that we have to be more actively involved in this processes. And that is the opportunity that if we take the stock take now at home, this could change the result in Dubai. And that's our task, to make it real and to make it an opportunity to make it real. Let's go to discussions of how to do it. In the sense, next slide, we have, once again, it's not anymore our wish list, or it's not a voluntary assessment. The Paris Agreement, Glasgow Climate Pact, gives us the mandate to do this kind of tasks. I mean, it's not anymore, oh, the nations are not doing their job. No, if there is a failure, we also have a role to play. If there is a success, it's also on us. And especially in June 2022, the negotiators finally heard us say that, okay, this should not be just one-off event in Dubai. The local and international stocktakers can also be providing input. And that's our biggest mechanism to rely on. Next slide, please. So how to conduct this? I would like to encourage you to focus on 3 main topics. Next slide. First of all, our own homework. What is our commitment? Did we really have a commitment for 2030? Did we declare climate emergency? If yes, our constituents are participating into that one. The next one is at the national level. How are we working with our national governments? Are they talking to us? Do we inform them? Are they generating resources that we can deliver our commitments? That is the next big question. And third is, where is justice? Are we able to bring all the society's actors? Are we all on board in getting the grasping the fruits of a new civilization? Are we taking all on board? Are we making anyone feel excluded? So that is the challenge, and we have to discuss this in this stocktake process. In order to save time, I will not go into too much of this, because in the next slides that you will receive in your link, you can go a bit more details of this. But I think we will now give the floor to our key partner, because the climate action has never turned into an emergency mode if the youth were not on the stage and if they were not demanding this. And we are very happy our colleagues from UNGO has joined us in making the stock takes at the local level. So I think it's better now we give some voice to their perspectives, because this is a really brilliant opportunity how we can make this event meaningfully result-oriented and make sure that the nations take lessons learned from this process as well. Alisa, I think it's time for me to go back to the floor. So thank you.
Thanks, Yunus. Appreciate that global look. Juliet, we invite you to talk about the importance of youth engagement and the partnership that we've formed during these next few months in including youth voices in local stocktakes that are happening.
Thank you so much, Alisa, and I hope I'm audible enough. So first of all, allow me to extend my greatest appreciation to ICLE team. We have been working together over the past few years, in doing lots of projects around youth, but most importantly now being part of the team that actually endorsed the local stocktake for youth. So I'm really grateful to be here to represent UNGO, and my name is Juliet Oluoch. I am from the Cities Working Group. So before I start my interventions, I think as UNGO and as the young people here in the call, the local stock take process for us is an accountability exercise. This is the moment that we have been waiting for, and thanks to like-minded partners like ICLEI, who are really seeing the value of involving young people in such processes. Speaking from the cities working group perspective, first I'd like to mention and give us a little bit of statistics that presently, and we must probably know this, that urban communities are contributing up to 70% of energy related greenhouse gas emissions globally, but they are also amongst the most vulnerable hotspots for climate change impacts. Taking a close example for the urban informal settlements in the global south, for example. So this reality really means that these urban communities are at the center of how we are going to achieve our global climate targets. And it's now critical that the national, regional, and local governments jointly shape and align and implement these climate initiatives at all levels to harness the potential of the urban world. So, not to forget also that it's really important to recognize that the youth engagement is not merely a buzzword, but it's necessary if we want to build a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient community. So we are leaders of today, and this has been said many times, and we can't stress this enough. So when we engage in the local stock tech process, then our potential to drive innovation is unleashed. We bring in fresh perspectives that can be infused and, realize positive transformation and catalyze this kind of transformation that we want to see. So why then should we be part of the local stock takes? Um, I've mentioned that we bring diverse perspectives and experiences and viewpoints on the table. And I'm going to give a really practical example of what Yungo is doing and how the local stocktake can really tap into the process that Yungo is engaging in. But it's also important to note that engaging youth in stocktake processes is an investment in the future. By now involving us, we empower this kind of young people with knowledge. You give them the necessary skills and motivation needed to speed up actions on the ground. And as the speakers before me has mentioned, the stocktake process really gives an opportunity to demonstrate and show how local action is already playing a role in climate change adaptation and mitigation. So when youth actively participate in this process, they develop a sense of ownership of the entire process, but also the accountability of the outcomes. So how can then, how can we tap into what Yungo is already doing? As you may be aware, in the call, we organize a local conference of youth across different regions globally. And this event is usually a platform for engaging different youths in the grassroots levels on different topics ahead of the COP processes. And in addition to providing a space for capacity building and policy training in order to empower young people. But I also like to mention a really great opportunity that presents itself through the LCOI processes, where we just not bring youths who are allied and who have been part of this climate change processes. But through the LCOIs, we are able to tap into the knowledge of the marginalized community, knowledge of the vulnerable. We bring on board women, and in my country, I came from Kenya. We have this group called the Maasai Group, and every year when we plan and organize the LCOI, we ensure that their perspectives are really brought to book, and we are able to tap into their knowledge and how they are adapting to this climate change. So the local stocktake can therefore be conducted in tandem with the LCOI process across the different regions. And the advantage is that this is an opportunity to integrate the most neglected climate voices in the stocktake process. Now, the LCOI also provides a platform for global climate action coordination. And through the COP meetings and the global stock takes, which are very critical for harnessing, the global progress on climate action. Therefore, promoting this kind of local stock takes through LCOI can really help to ensure that local actions and concerns are integrated into the global processes. Youth in Yungo also use the LCOI to gather data and insights on local climate actions and impacts, which can then be shared at the global level to enrich the understanding of the broader climate situation. So the ELCO events over time have provided a platform for young climate activists to network with other like-minded individuals and organizations. And by promoting local stock tech processes, we can now foster collaboration among different youth groups, among different NGOs, different organizations to enhance their collective impact on climate action. So LCOIs are valuable for educating communities. They are valuable when talking about climate change and the local impacts at the grassroots level. So through organizing this local stock takes by the ALCO, we are able to raise awareness and educate the public, further mobilizing support for climate action. I would like to conclude by saying that leveraging on LCOI processes to promote local stock tech is a strategic approach for making young people's voices be heard, but also contributing to the global climate assessments and driving meaningful change in climate policies and actions. So this is an opportunity for us young people to connect local efforts to the broader climate movement and engage with stakeholders at local levels. So also like to just further really extend my gratitude to ICLEI once again. We have really worked handy and we look forward to, pushing for this process of local stock tech just because we know how much this means to the young people, but we also see the bigger picture of what is the end goal for this. We are contributing to a global cause, and as Yungo, as young people present in the call today, and as my colleagues who are in the call can testify, we are more than willing to work together and to support this initiative. So thank you so much, Jonas, and thank you so much, ICLEI, for always partnering with Yungo in such novel initiatives. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. We're thrilled that Yungo endorsed the global stocktake process and your participation in this during this time. And part of the benefit of working with ICLEI during this process is we can ensure that you, as you start to plan your local stocktake, that we can help you coordinate with local youth to ensure they're part of the process as well. Next, I'd like to invite Cal Roberts from ICLEI USA to share a little bit about his experience working with the city of Concord, and then we will hear from Rob about what it really takes to host a local stocktake, to give you some perspective of what's really involved, what it looks like, and how it might look in your own city. Cal?
Great, thank you, Alyssa. Thank you to Yungo. We've really loved the partnership to bring the stocktake to life, including in the city of Concord and several other locations in the United States. So I'll talk to everyone about the more practical aspects of how to host your own stocktake event. Hopefully make the whole venture a little less intimidating and show you how it's really about having a conversation with your community. So my name is Cale. I work in the U.S. Office of ICLEI out of New York. I've had the pleasure of supporting a number of U.S. cities and regions to host their stocktake for climate emergency event. And I'll share a little lessons about what worked very well in those places. So if you'll go to the next slide. I want to thank the Daring Cities team already for the fun I had with my animations. So I'll just tell you next when it's time to move on. But the cities that I've worked with have been very energized by the opportunity that they do not need to travel far away to make a contribution to the Paris Agreement. We all know that attending a COP or a regional climate week is inherently going to exclude most people who can't make the trip. So if you'll click, this year's stocktake process allows every city or region in the world to bring the COP home for a day, for an afternoon, or even just for a few hours. So by hosting a stocktake in your city hall or your regional parliament, you institutionalize the Paris contributions within your local government process. Next, please. So let me tell you about how this happened with the communities I worked with. The stocktake might sound overly technical, even a bit intimidating, like I was saying, but at its core, it's simply a conversation with your community, a chance for people to get together and create a vision for what high ambition in climate action means. And this happens in a very straightforward set of steps here on the screen. You pick a date and a location, you gather your community members together with local leaders, youth, other stakeholders to answer a set of questions that we've provided to you in a toolkit that I'll go over a little bit. And then you record those responses in a reporting form, write them down, have a note taker, and you'll send those back to the LGMA for us to share with the UN on your behalf. Next slide, please. We've recommended choosing a public space, a public building, such as a town hall to host your event. These types of locations are familiar to your community, hopefully, and send a clear sign that climate action is a part of day-to-day government activities. Next, please. In some cases, neighboring communities host their stocktake together at a regional level, like a regional parliament. Next. But really anywhere that people feel comfortable and gather naturally can be a great venue. Don't feel blocked if you don't have access to a city-owned location. Next, please. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we have many fall and harvest festivals coming up, so hosting a stocktake at an event that's already planned is a good option. Next, please. Wherever you host your event, choose a setup that allows for a meaningful discussion. So the communities that I worked with had a series of roundtables that made it really easy for smaller discussions to happen. So I recommend an arrangement like that. Next, please. Of course, you'll need to tell your community that your event is happening. And when marketing, you should take the stocktake messaging and then make it your own. You'll know what will resonate with your community stakeholders. I found, or we found, that even the word stocktake itself is not immediately recognizable to everyone. So in here in the US, a regional entity in Florida, they chose to call their event a climate justice conversation because they knew that would resonate with their participants. Next, please. Who should be at your stocktake event? As Juliet was saying, this list will give you a good start. Youth, from school-aged students to local university students, gathered with business owners, your mayor or other local leaders. It really all segments of society, right, that will have a stake in meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement and preparing a vision for climate action. So bringing residents and policymakers together can be a really powerful recipe. We minimally advocate to have some decision makers with youth represented in each event. Next, please. If you're worried about how to facilitate such a diverse group, we have a full set of resources in our toolkit. This link will circulate after the call, but it includes an agenda to follow, a set of slides that explain the process and guide your participants in the roundtable discussions. Next. So let's walk through the agenda real fast. This is just a sample, and we envision an agenda of about 2 hours long, but it's very easy and encouraged to add more time to the roundtable discussions in particular if you wanted to make this a half-day event. Next slide. To make sure all your local leaders have ownership over the process, you might open the event with an address from a mayor, a governor, or a council member from your community. This photo here is from the city of Concord, who you'll hear from next, where state Congress person Rebecca McWilliams inspired the audience for the discussion. Next slide. Culture heritage, and art are key components of climate action. So in an event I worked with in Denver, Colorado, a local youth poet named Morgan De Soletti delivered the most beautiful song and a piece of poetry that outlined what a climate vision meant to her. I mean, it really set a tone for the rest of the event. So super, super nice input there. Next slide, please. When working with New York City, when we previewed the local stock taking process 1 year ago, the city had visiting scientists that set the scene for what climate change projected for the region. In this case, our friend Dr. Deborah Roberts of the IPCC. Of course, you don't need an IPCC scientist to join your event. Invite your local scientific community or a knowledgeable, trusted messenger to your event to kind of set that scene. Next slide, please. That scientists can connect what is happening locally to what your country is doing nationally to meet its Paris Agreement plan, also called an NDC. Because the global stocktake process is originally intended for nations, making this link between the local to the national can send a powerful signal that towns and cities and subnational entities are the key partners in NDC progress. Next, please. So by this stage of your event, the participants will have sufficient background and are ready to jump into their discussions. We've divided the remaining part of the agenda into 3 segments, each one facilitating a roundtable discussion among your participants to answer those 3 core questions of the local stocktake that Eunice had mentioned. So these are, where is our community today on its climate ambition, and how does that support the national goals? Second, what is our vision for ambitious climate action going forward? And then finally, how do we get there in a way that promotes justice for all? Next slide, please. Again, here in New York, we broke up each segment so that inspiring speakers and mayors could give their reflections on the questions in between each of the roundtables. It was really a way to make the event as engaging as possible. And invite you to, come up with any inputs that will make your event very dynamic. Next slide, please. Just have a couple here left to tell you a little bit about what happens after your event to report out on your success. The toolkit includes a reporting sheet. It's set up like a spreadsheet that lists all of the recommended questions. So these are the ones that your small groups will answer at the roundtable. Each of those 3 core questions have several sub questions that you could consider. You don't need to fill out your reporting answers in a very long format. You really want to provide just enough specific information from your roundtables that lets the LGMA and ultimately the UNFCCC know what's important to your community and how that connects to the NDC. Next slide, please. In that Denver event, an artist had sketched out a poster from the discussions. So that piece made a nice, piece of art that supplemented to the reporting piece. So you're invited to be creative as well. All right, next slide, last couple here. We at ICLEI and the wider LGMA community are your advocates in this process. Send your final stocktake report in a format that works for you, direct by email when you're finished, to lgma@iclei.org. You could even send us a heads up note ahead of time that it's coming soon. We're compiling the submissions to share with the UN ahead of COP28, meaning your event ideally is concluded and reported well before the beginning of December. Even by the end of October would be great, but we understand and are wanting to be flexible with your scheduling. Next slide. If you're needing on-the-ground support hosting your event, the LGMA is a partnership of many organizations, no doubt working in your region, happy to lend technical support. We heard from Andy at the Global Covenant already. And then final slide here, we are an ICLEI team around the world, no doubt working in your region. So get in touch with us. Together, we can show that cities and regions are the bright spots in this year's Global Stocktake. Thank you.
Thanks, Cal. We appreciate that really practical insight and viewpoints from your work with various cities in the US and how they went about contributing to the Global Stocktake. Next, we'll hear from Rob Werner from the City of Concord about their unique experience hosting a local stocktake. Rob?
Well, thanks so much, Alyssa and Kale and the whole team. And Kale had told me early on that Concord had the distinction of being the first community to do a local stocktake. And actually, there was a newspaper article in the Concord Monitor prior to the meeting that made note of that. So that was a nice thing to be able to promote and publicize. I would go back to what Eunice had talking about in terms of these three questions and what are so central. Where are we? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? For Concord, next slide, please. For Concord, we had a good, robust discussion. We did it a little differently in terms of sort of starting off with this process, because when we first started talking about how do we do the stocktake, how do we involve the community, who should we involve, we talked about doing multiple meetings and not just one. I think that what we want to do is a bit of an iterative process in terms of getting feedback, providing information as to where we are, what projects the city is pursuing, and then have a feedback loop for additional meetings and gatherings. This is not a one-off engagement with our community, and I think that is important. No matter how you structure the meeting and stocktake, I think that you need to have a way to communicate back to those who are involved as to, well, you came up with this idea. This is how we are pursuing it. This is how we're implementing it, and then proceed in that way. When we convened our meeting, and I'm very glad that Kale was there with us. It was helpful for him to be there to provide sort of the global perspective. And again, that connection that's so important between the global, national, and in our case, national, state, and local, because we all know that no matter how ambitious these goals are, the implementation of them is going to happen and does happen most effectively on the local level. That's where the resources really need to be implemented to make progress. Next slide, please. So where are we? Concord is a community that has committed to 100% renewable energy goal. What that specifically means is electricity by 2030, transportation and thermal by 2050. The City Council unanimously endorsed that concept a few years ago. I'm happy to say that the Greater Concord Chamber of Commerce and the business community also endorsed that goal. They endorsed the goal within their own board of directors, and when we had our Concord City Council hearing on this proposal, the business community represented by the chamber did come and was very supportive of it. We have pursued greenhouse gas inventories, and this is where being a member of ICLEI has been very important and helpful to us, because the ClearPath tool has been essential in terms of how is it that we provide and develop data as to where we are. And so that we've not only been able to get that baseline data, but through the ClearPath tool, we've been able to consider various incentives and procedures and scenarios as to what our projects would be. We've done an LED streetlight project. We have 2,100 streetlights in the city of Concord, and all of those streetlights have been switched over to LED. And it's not only environmentally advantageous, but saves us quite a lot of money over the period of time. Weatherize Concord, this is a program where we've been able to provide information incentives and financial incentives working with our state of New Hampshire Saves, and the utilities to provide energy efficiency for our citizens. So this is what we talked about in terms of where are we, what have we done as a city, and Cale made note of Representative McWilliams. That was an important aspect of our discussion because, and I think you might consider this in terms of at least not only states, but other localities where it's appropriate. Where does the national policy of wherever you are influence your ability to pursue local policies? That certainly is very true in the United States. So that is an important aspect. Where do we want to go? We talked about our proposed projects. We actually have made an award to a solar developer to produce a 5-megawatt solar array on our capped landfill. The school district is going to be an off-taker of that. The city is going to be in part an off-taker of that. So that's a very significant project that has been a long time coming. A very significant thing that a lot of folks are very interested in at this meeting, and we are pursuing, is community power. This is the whole aspect of community aggregation of electricity to give people more choice and lower costs in terms of their energy, and to provide more choice around renewable energy options. And frankly, I don't think that the city of Concord or most municipalities would really be able to achieve the goals like our 100% renewable energy goal without the implementation of this kind of program that gives people on the residential level much more control and choice over their electric supply. We'll be launching a Solarize Concord program early in the year, where folks can be able to take advantage of some discounts with a number of providers and developers that we're working with. So these are the kinds of, and EV charging infrastructure for the city, and some of the monies that are coming down from the IRA and other national aspects are going to help with this. These are the kinds of things that people were specifically interested in and raised at the stocktake that we had in May. We decided to sort of take a breather over the summer, but I think that we're going to be figuring out some times where we can have additional meetings. I would say one thing that we need to pay a little more attention to is youth involvement in future meetings, more specific business involvement. We had a very good discussion, and we had a good turnout, and there were many, many good ideas that were generated there, some of which are reflected in what we've talked about. But there's so much more to do. This is a really practical exercise, and it needs to be measurable as well, practical and measurable. And this is where that feedback loop, I think, is important in terms of engaging the community. You want to make sure that, you listened to the community. They had priorities. How can those priorities be integrated into policies in the city, not only for your municipal government by itself, but the entire community? How can that be communicated back to the community that we got your feedback, we listened to you, we are continuing to be engaged with you. This is, again, not a one-off process, we think, and we would want to pursue it that way. And this is the progress that we're making together. We're all part of this. I think that's really fundamental in terms of keeping people's interests and, frankly, trust, in terms of saying, we did this process, we're continuing to do this process, we're listening, and we're taking those suggestions and we're implementing. That's how I would say that these processes can be well done and well documented and well received.
Thanks, Rob. That's really great insight and helpful to show how you took the ICLEI toolkit and support from ICLEI US and focused around these 3 questions and really engage your community in a meaningful way and are able to contribute to the global stocktake process. Really exciting to hear that firsthand experience. Thanks for joining today. I'll turn it over to Eunice, who will share some upcoming dates we have for global stocktakes happening. We would love to add your dates to this calendar as well, and then announce upcoming or a newly announced application for funding to help you support a local stocktake, and then we will open it up for question and answers as we wind down here at the end. Eunice?
Thank you, Alyssa. Thanks to all colleagues. I'm so happy to hear real experiences and even inspired by additional innovative approaches by Rob and City of Concord. Maybe you can continue to exchange with Juliet so that maybe there could be a local youth event in Concord that could also make you further follow up on your outcome that will be branded as a good practice. But let's remember, Concord is not alone. They have not been the only one in this process. Because of this motivation, we have also been reaching out to other cities around the world. You can hear this testimonies from Mayor of Sefiani, from Chef Shawan, Glasgow Council leader Susan Aitken. She will also host in end of October. What we are now trying to do is this process should also be much more attractive in the Global South. At the moment, we only have an entry from Belize, Belmopan. I see my colleague Veronica, who is working for this process. We hope this will continue. We would be happy to hear the outcome. But in order to, let's say, motivate and encourage this, we have made a call for applications for the Global South cities. If you go to the next slide, this is aiming to give some incentives. It's a very small budget, 2,000 per event, but at least we could at least make come over some of the challenges if you are ever facing it. This will be a kind of a demand-driven process. So we will ask you to indicate what type of a structure that you would need for support. As you have heard, you may be thinking of bringing scientists to your house, or you can try to bring your local communities be present in the room, or you can have your venue to be prepared for that. Kata, if you go to the next slide, there is also the link. I think you will be able to share. This call is now open for that. What we would like you try to commit to us that, as you have heard from Rob, you share your outcomes. That's the most critical thing. And we can convey this to the UNFCCC gatherings in Dubai. They are very eager to hear this kind of experiences. We would like to encourage also to other cities who do not necessarily need an additional support from ICLEI, but still to be listed that this is a collective effort. We would be also making this, if we can prove that this is a successful experience, we can consider that every year local and regional governments, in terms of their responsibility to make such consultations and dialogues and report to their national government, so that we don't have to wait for the next 5 years, because if we do not take action, the next 5 years will be much more desperate for all of us. I mean, there are colleagues who are already mentioning about the adaptation, which will also be an issue in all the stock takes. So we have to, if we want to go to the emergency mode of action, such very innovative, open, frank, and inspirational dialogues is exactly what we need. Instead of paying attention to other issues of the world, we have to focus on things that we can make impact and make a change in our societies and help global processes be delivered. I stop here and happy to respond if there are any questions, Alyssa. Thank you.
Thanks, Eunice. We'd like to now launch a poll. Hopefully today you gain kind of the global perspective, the local perspective on the importance of local and regional participation in the global stocktake process. And we want to just gauge your interest. Are you interested in anyone from ICLEI following up with you to provide additional resources and support, share more information about experiences for hosting a local stocktake still yet this year? Select either yes, maybe, if you're interested in learning more, or maybe not this year. And this is something that we want to ingrain into maybe an annual process. So it's something that we can be involved with in the future. So select your answer here, and then if you have any questions, please submit them via the question and answer feature within Zoom. We have a couple minutes to answer a few of those. Any we don't get to, we'll follow up in the follow-up email, which will include a link to the slides today, recording of the webinar, as well as the toolkit and this link to the call for applications. Give you another couple seconds here to respond to the poll.
Alyssa, by the way, there is also a question from in the Q&A box about the modality of the let's say reimbursement. Would you mind if I respond to our colleague?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Jana Maulik, sorry if I do not pronounce your name appropriately. Yes, exactly. If you fill the form, you would see at the end that we request you to indicate us the expense that you are expecting, and we will be only reimbursing once you send us your report and the invoice. So that's exactly the model we will be following. Yes, you do not have to ask in advance. You'll just deliver your event. You'll send us the expense, and it's up to 2,000 US dollars, and then we'll reimburse you directly.
Great, thanks. All right, we'll end the poll, and for those who answered accordingly, we'll be following up with you because we'd love to get your local stock take on the calendar. We have time for probably 2 questions here really quickly if we can get to them. One of the questions is around, there are so many questions that you could ask. We focused in on kind of 3 within our toolkit, but there's so many issue areas. Either Cal, Eunice, anyone, Rob, do you have any insider perspective on how do you craft that agenda or hone in a few items that are particularly of interest given the broad swath of topics that could be covered as a part of this local stock take?
I guess what I'd focus in on is the things that are really practical and measurable in your community. For example, it was pointed out that at our meeting by someone that in order for us to meet our goals by 2050, we're going to have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in Concord by 4% a year. So how do we practically do that? And things like pursuing the community power program that I described, putting more renewable energy in your community, and then being able to use tools like ClearPath. Okay, what did that actually impact? How did that reduce our greenhouse gas initiatives or emissions rather? And how is that going to contribute to that reduction path that's so important? So I think focusing in on the practical things that are going to make the most difference is the way I would approach it.
Great, thanks, Rob. And then I think lastly, before we close the webinar today, can you tell us about the timing? Do these events need to take place between now and COP28? And if a city maybe wasn't positioned well to do something this year, what could their engagement look like in the future?
Maybe I can respond to that. Ideally, we would like to enrich the discussion in Dubai, which will start on 30th of November. But we are also trying to document a proof of the clear interest that there is a demand that to make this to be regularly. So if you already have such a position, please indicate this to us so that we can inform. We wish the nations would agree the stock take is not waiting for 5 more years ahead. Every it takes place and local stock takes will be part of it. Maybe you heard the only party now who has made a commitment to take a stock take at the national level is EU, European Union. It's on the 20th of October. The other countries, the other nations have not made any commitment. They will only do it in Dubai at the COP. But we want this to be at home, at the capital, at their own cities. So let's use all the evidence that there is a demand, there is a potential that this should now be a momentum to push more ambitious and real action. A couple of more questions came up. There was this also, by the way, I heard from Juliet she wants to approach to Nairobi, and definitely it will be nice because Nairobi is also a very active city, and we will be happy to connect our colleagues to ICLEI Africa. And I heard a response from Kampala. Our colleague is asking how we can connect Kampala. Those are member. Again, maybe our colleagues from Africa Secretariat can reach out to our colleague there.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate all of our speakers today. It was a really robust discussion, very practical. We hope this demystified the local stocktake process and are looking forward to supporting many more cities and participating over these next few months. We'd like to share that we are continuing with our virtual forum for Daring Cities later this week with another webinar focused on cities with nature support for local governments in the climate emergency. We encourage you to check out our additional virtual forums still happening throughout the rest of the year building up to COP as part of Daring Cities. And we want to thank you all for joining us today. Have a good rest of your day.